Sanamugela in the venue Mhlaba in South Africa. Welcome to the World Cup in South Africa on 5 Live Sport.
It's about the world's greatest players.
Ronaldo takes the free kick. Messi's through. Kaka into the penalty area. Henry! Vieira has won it.
It's about the world's best teams.
Grosso to win the World Cup for Italy. Left-footed, and he scores!
It's about South Africa.
It's time.
And it's about England.
Now Lampard into Rooney. Gerrard's header. 4-0.
Welcome to the World Cup.
Heskey gets past the defender. Heskey still into the penalty. Into Rooney. Great goal.
Tevez takes on the defender. Beats the second defender. Tevez is through. And he has scored brilliantly.
Ribery's made the run. The flag stays down. Ribery's in here. And Ribery has equalised for France. Torres gets past the defender. Beats the goalkeeper. Brings it down inside the penalty area. Robin van Persie. 2-0 to Holland.
Kaka inside the penalty area. Shoots from the angle. Kaka scores. He's all the way through.
It's a great goal. Kalou weaved his way through 5 or 6 challenges. Wow!
South Africa 2010.
The World Cup.
This is 5 Live Sport.
Every game from every ground.
Well, a very good evening to you from Johannesburg. We really hope to get you in the mood for the World Cup in the next 2.5 hours or so. And we want to know how you're feeling on the eve of this first African World Cup. So do send us a text on 85058. You can send us an email. You can tweet me at Mark Pougatch. Who's your team and how are you feeling? And that is a very appropriate question for one of our guests this evening, the South African journalist Mark Gleeson, who knows more about African football than any man on the planet. Mark, good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Mark.
What about this then? It's a double whammy, this, because it's a South African event and it's an African event.
Yeah, obviously in the beginning when the first bid was against the English rather, and against the Germans, it was marketed as an African bid, the first time to bring the tournament to the continent. The second time round it was an all-African bid, but that sort of logo and that slogan stuck with South Africa. I think it's backfired a little bit on them because there's not much going back into the rest of Africa in terms of resources and things, which I think some people were expecting. But you know, at the end of the day, the South African taxpayer paid for these glorious stadiums that we will be playing in over the next 4 weeks, and certainly the great infrastructure that's been put together. And I think ultimately, you know, it is the first World Cup in Africa, but it's more of a homecoming party for South Africa. You know, a country that's really travelled a great rocky road over the last century or so, and in a sense is coming of age somewhat belatedly behind the rest of the world, but coming of age in rather spectacular fashion over the last couple of days.
You talk about the last century or so, Mark. I mean, the last 20 years. I mean, England's last really triumphant World Cup was Italia 90. During Italia 90, we wouldn't have been walking around Santon the way we were, seeing society mixing the way it was, people eating together in restaurants the way it were, even shopping malls the way they are now. It's an extraordinary 2 decades.
It has. I mean, and in a sense, you know, the 2010 has also been a sort of a rallying point for the country over the last 6 years since South Africa won the bid on May the 15th, 2004 in Zurich. So, you know, it's a wonderful time. It's been amazing to see over the last couple of days alone, just this real rallying cry, the fever and general delirium and madness that this World Cup has brought about here in Johannesburg in particular. I think completely unexpected, even by the most fervent of fanatics about how successful the World Cup would be.
Graham Taylor is with us as well. Graham, very good evening to you. Just got off a flight, so you're showing terrific stamina there, Mr. T. Now, what you would have missed while you're on your flight, which Mark alluded to, was the excitement here yesterday, which was basically an open top bus parade before the tournament, which Carlos Alberto Pereira, that was, I thought, a little bit sniffy about, the coach, but I thought that was a great rallying cry, a great PR cue. They're not going to win the World Cup, so why not celebrate it, if you like, in advance? I thought it was terrific.
Well, you know, it's unfortunate I wasn't here, because having come today, it's impossible not to recognise the atmosphere, the excitement, the smiles. Just, you know, something is happening. If you just landed on Earth now and you came into South Africa, you'd say this is just a different country, because everybody is alive. You cannot help but feel the atmosphere. And quite honestly, Mark, I feel great to be part of it.
Well, I thought it was absolutely fantastic what they did yesterday. Mark, it's going to be very noisy. It's going to be very colourful. I said in my introduction, it's definitely going to be memorable. Are you actually a little bit worried about the noise, the vuvuzelas? I think in the last week the British vocabulary has expanded by one word, and everyone knows what it is now.
It has, and there'll be a few more to add, I think, before the 4 weeks up. I think they've dug themselves in a little bit of a hole, and Sepp Blatter, in his populist, in the way he likes to be a little bit of a populist, got the impression early on that there were, that South Africans in particular were a little bit iffy about the foreigners telling them that they could, to turn off that noise. During the Confederations Cup, there were a couple of complaints from European television viewers that it was spoiling their enjoyment of the game, and it became a little bit of a nationalistic drum banging, if I can use that expression. But my fear is that in 10 years' time or 15 years' time, when people look back on this World Cup, that they will remember it most for this really ear-splitting. I mean, it is just a torment for the afternoon, and I do think there's going to be a little crisis point somewhere along the line in this World Cup where someone's going to have to perhaps take a little bit of a stand about this noise, because the warm-up games that we've had over the last couple of weeks, and we've had one at Soccer City with Colombia, absolutely extraordinarily deafening. I mean, you really cannot hear yourself think.
Just do that at your peril, because they did it at the Oval, Mark, and the Oval's never been the same again. When the England play Test cricket there, especially against the West Indies. Seriously, the atmosphere's never been quite the same once they banned the instruments coming in.
I think first of all, there's a real danger for world football that this piece of Chinese plastic makes its way across the world, because every kid leaving here with his parent who's come to watch the World Cup is going to want to take one of those things home with him. And to be honest with you, it's a lot of fun to blow. It's not that great, though, when you haven't got one in your hand and you're on the receiving end, particularly from 90,000 people.
Yeah, well, you're going to get experience soon. The other word we're going to be introduced to is the macaraba, which is one of these helmets. It's like a construction helmet that people wear and paint in their own colours, Graham. But much more from you two in a minute. What I want to leave you with now is this thought, which also Chester Williams, the winger from the 1995 Rugby Union World Cup, the black winger, said. He said, if you thought that was big, multiply it by 10, and then you get some sort of sense of what this World Cup means to the man and woman on the street. That gives you a great idea.
Well, as I said earlier, Mark, you can sense it, you can see it, you can feel it, and I've been here half a day, and exactly what we're talking about. I think the thing with the vuvuzela really is that as long as they're blown and not used as any kind of weapon,
Have you heard one yet?
One? I've already must have heard. You cannot but hear them. Just as you're sort of coming down, as the aeroplane's coming down, you're thinking, is this making a noise? And you realise it's the vuvuzelas.
And no, I'm not bringing any home, in case young ones are listening. That's for sure. Okay, we've got Mark and Graham with us for a little bit. With so many people to talk to tonight, we're going to nip round the country, hear from our teams everywhere, and hear from people associated with various national sides as well, to get some sort of sense of how they're feeling on the eve of this World Cup. Southwest of here, in Soweto, Russell Fuller's at a party to launch the BBC's World Service World Cup Have Your Say coverage. Russell, Soweto, one of the most famous names in the world, if you like. Everybody has heard of it and its historical significance. Give us an idea of where you are.
Well, it is a region transformed, Mark. There's still plenty of work to do, but lots of money has been spent in Soweto because South Africa won the World Cup. Accommodation has sprung up. New buses have been unveiled for the World Cup, new roads as well, and definitely Soweto, one of the big winners of South Africa winning the World Cup. We have come to Sakunzi restaurant in Vilakazi Street, a very, very famous street because two Nobel Prize winners used to live here. We're very, very close to the former residence of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and Nelson Mandela's house is just a stone throw away. It's now been turned into a museum, but it was the house that he spent many, many years in before he was imprisoned on Robben Island. And what an atmosphere we have here. We do have the vuvuzelas. We have fans from all around the world wrapped in flags, wearing colourful wigs. The Germans are here. There are many South Africans, as you'd expect. I've just spotted a guy from Algeria. Portugal, New Zealand, Australia, they're all here. And the French have just arrived as well. And absolutely underlining what you said before, the party begins tonight, and there is such a sense of anticipation all around South Africa, and I think in particular somewhere like Soweto, where they could only have dreamed of being part of a World Cup when we think of the apartheid struggles of the 70s and 80s.
Russell, I was on that street yesterday, and it felt a privilege really to be able to see such a famous street, not just in African history but in global history. And Soccer City, where the opening ceremony in the first game tomorrow, that is in Soweto. It's not far from you.
It's the closest venue.